tarda. Però primer de tot tinc que excusar-me perquè la meva veu no respon massa, perquè fins abans estava ingressat per una tonteria d'una pneumònia que m'ha deixat la veu a mitges. Però no em podia perdre una sessió com la d'avui. Sí, i benvinguts, molt agraït per la presència, benvolgut president Montilla, querido cònsol de Bèlgica en Barcelona, i benvinguts tots vostès, amics y coneguts. Bueno, esta es la nueva sesión del ciclo promovido e impulsado por el Consulado General de Bélgica, que tiene alguna novedad, y es que es el acto en el que tenemos una persona más joven de todo el año, porque el ponente de hoy ha tenido la gentileza de venir con su hijo. Entonces, muchas gracias, felicidades. Claro, cuando una persona empieza tan pronto a interesarse por estas cosas, tiene un futuro prometedor. Nieto de científicos, hijo de científicos, pues yo qué sé, no sé cómo acaba su hijo. En todo caso, enhorabuena y muchas gracias por su presencia. Es un placer tenerte aquí. Bueno, gràcies a tots vostès. I no m'allargo més perquè l'interessant avui és escoltar un tema com el que ens ocupa. Els agraeixo molt la presència, malgrat el dia tan poc hospitalari, i a més em preguntava quantes persones, després del Ramon Pasqual, seran capaces de seguir el ponent al 100%. I jo intueixo que quedarà a un terç de l'explicació, però bueno, posant de bona voluntat, alguna cosa aprendrem. Estic molt intrigat i molt interessat per la sessió d'avui. Moltes gràcies al ponent, moltes gràcies al moderador i reiterar el meu agraïment al Consulado General de Bélgica, con el que sinceramente, es un auténtico placer trabajar. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, señor Anaspa. Estimados amigos, queridos amigos, dear friends. First and foremost, a warm welcome to all of you who have gone through rain to come today here at this third lecture of our cycle of Europa Talks, which is a cycle that we organize during the Belgian presidency of the EU. A very warm welcome, of course, to our partners, Señor Naspa, la Fundación La Caixa, but also the Office of the Club de Roma in Barcelona, the delegation of the EU Commission in Barcelona. Without their support, it would not be possible for the Belgian Consulate to organize this lecture, so thank you very much again. Nuclear energy, always a hot topic. Today, we are happy to offer you the insights of a Belgian nuclear physician, Dr. Paul Wouters. Paul lives and works in Barcelona, and he's working for Fusion for Energy, as Mr. Naspa already said, which is the EU agency which is coordinating the EU contribution to the international project for creating a nuclear fusion reactor in the south of France in a little place called Cadarache. The technical and scientific challenges are great, they're immense, I'm sure Paul will speak about them. But the need for clean, renewable, reliable, and safe energy source is even bigger. We are still far away from an operational power plant, and sometimes we might wonder if we will ever get there. Indeed, besides the numerous technical challenges, other alternatives are there. And some others might even respond to our ever-growing need for electricity. Research and scientific breakthrough are also being made in other energy sources, and the production of electricity from wind, hydro, solar, or hydrogen is increasing rapidly. At the same time, some argue for the construction of more nuclear fission plants as an adequate answer to the challenges ahead. And this is, of course, a tested technology, a reliable source of electricity, and it will also, or it could also, diminish our carbon footprint, limit climate change, reduce pollution, and increase massively the electricity production that we need. In Europe, at least, there seems to be a growing consensus away from fossil fuels. But as we all saw a few years ago with the gas crisis following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, today, very few of our economies stand ready to do without gas and petrol. Will nuclear energy, albeit from fission or from fusion, be our salvation? I thank Dr. Paul Wouters and the moderator, Mr. De Vienne, for their time and willingness to share their insight with us today. And I wish you all, of course, a very interesting evening. Thank you.
So, do you hear me well? Yeah. So what a lovely day, rainy day, to speak about the power of the sun, isn't it? Yeah, so thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation. So I'm pleased also to introduce the topic of today, which I would like to put in the context of the European green transition. It's indeed no secret that there is an increased demand of energy in the world. And on the same time, the current energetic mix is not able to mitigate or stop the climate change consequences. Needless to say that in our day-to-day, we can all see it. In addition to this cocktail, the geopolitical context pushes European Union towards securing its energy fuel and energy supply, and also looking at sustainable, low-carbon emitting source of energy. And for this, the scientists, the engineers, the technicians, the politics have scratched their heads during decades to find the best way to produce as much as possible unlimited low-carbon footprint energy. And here, nuclear fusion appears as a very good candidate in this energy mix to supply future generation with this unlimited low-carbon emission. It's true that this attractive source of energy have been a source of ideal source, but I'm pretty sure that with the talk of today, we'll see that it's not science fiction, but it's reality. And for this, I'm pleased to introduce the speaker of today, Mr. Paul Wouters. So Paul is project manager in charge of nuclear safety and licensing at Fusion for Energy, the European Agency for Nuclear Fusion. He has a wide experience in the nuclear field, having worked for nuclear power plant in Dole in Belgium. He gives conferences on nuclear safety in universities such as Cambridge, KIT, and University Polytechnic of Catalonia. And he's also the Secretary General of the Assembly of Agency Staff Committee, representing workers for more than 50 European agencies. So let's warmly welcome Paul Wouters, and I think we're all looking forward to learn more about fusion.
So thanks a lot, and thanks again for the invitation to the Belgium Council, to CaixaForum, Fondation Caixa. So we will go now on ITER, the golden grail of energy, the prospect of fusion. So what is fusion at the end? Fusion is the reaction that you have the sun. It's a day-to-day reaction, like Arnaud mentioned, that you have every day in the sun. So we know that the fusion reaction is not some fiction, it really exists. And what is fusion itself? We go to the smallest elements on Earth, hydrogen, and we use the isotopes, tritium and deuterium. They just have each, deuterium has one neutron and a proton. Tritium has two neutrons and a proton. They are the smallest elements on Earth. They are isotopes of hydrogen. When you fuse them together with a temperature of around 10 million degrees, you get helium and a fast neutron. So helium is in fact the waste of your reaction. It's the same that you have as a child in the helium balloons. You have a little bit of helium inside, but this is the waste of your reaction. But where we are interested is in this neutron. This fast neutron gives the energy that we need out of the fusion reaction. And then here you have an example. It's the jet reactor. It's a donut-shaped fusion reactor. And in fact, where you see this purple light, that's where the fusion reaction happens. So there we go inside the donut at 10 million degrees. And the donut itself is a vacuum. It's 10 to the minus 8 millibar. And the fusion reaction, in fact, flies inside this vacuum reactor at 10 million degrees, because at 10 million degrees, whatever material that you would have on Earth, if it touch the material, it evaporates. That's why you need a magnetic field, a helicoidal field around your fusion reactor, and go to 100 to 150 million degrees of Celsius similar temperatures that you have on the sun. Now, what's the big difference between fusion and fission? In fusion, like we mentioned before, you have the deuterium-tritium reactions, isotopes of hydrogen, to make helium and energy. In a fission reaction, you have uranium, and uranium is a much heavier atom. So uranium splits in two atoms and gives also a neutron. But the big difference between a fusion reaction and a fission reaction is here that you have a slow neutron compared to the fast neutrons that you will have after a fusion reaction. And here you go from a big atom that you break into small atoms, while the other ones are small atoms that you bring together and you produce a lot of energy. Now, why do we need fusion? First of all, it's sustainable. You have no green gases, no CO2 emission, so it's a clean energy. It's like nuclear energy, wind energy, solar energy. It's all green energy that is produced thanks to this fusion reaction. Now, hydrogen, where do we get the hydrogen? Out of simple water. In principle, I just saw those bottles, very nice. This could power entire Barcelona with such a bottle. If this would be tritium, entire Barcelona could be powered with this bottle. So it's an abundant energy, and you can have it just out of seawater. Then the safety. Of course, this is one, when you speak about nuclear, everybody sees this black box and is afraid of it because it's seen as evil, but it's a very safe energy. Also, fusion is a very safe energy. If you have a little impurity coming in this plasma, the reaction stops. So just having in this donut-shaped reactor a very small impurity, the fusion reaction stops, and you cannot have a severe accident like Fukushima or other severe accidents where you have a molten core. With a fusion reactor, you don't have any molten core effect for this type of reactors. And then the radioactive waste. Tritium has a half-lifetime of 12 years. Compared to uranium, it's peanuts, it's nothing. Now, you have radioactive waste. It's not that you have zero radioactive waste. By those fast neutrons, the metals of your reactor will get irradiated. But after 30, 40 years not operation of your fusion plant, you could, in principle, recycle the metal inside the car industry, which with a fission plant, you never can do this type of things. Now, the ITER project. The ITER project is the largest research project on Earth. So we have a collaboration between Europe, ITER is built in the south of France, United States, Russian Federation, India, China, Japan, and Republic of Korea. So those 7 ITER parties, they form 50% of the world's population with a higher GDP of 80%. Now a little brief history. Where does the tokamak reactor comes from? It's a Russian invention. It was invented by Russia in 1951 by 2 Nobel Prize winners, Andrei Sakharov and Igor Tamm. Igor Tamm, here you see Igor Tamm, that is also a Nobel Prize winner for this tokamak. So tokamak, I will not pronounce it, it's too difficult in Russian, but it's in fact a torus formed room. So to from torus, kamak from a room. And a torus is like a donut-shaped reactor. Then another milestone is 1984. This was the creation of ITER, in fact, 1984, where Gorbachev, former Soviet Union premier, signed under President Mitterrand of France with President Reagan the construction for this international project to be set up for fusion energy for peaceful purposes. And this is very symbolic. This was the end of the Cold War. This was a very symbolic act in 1984 to sign this act between United States and Russia to have this fusion reactor built. And so here we have three parties. We have Europe, United States, in the time the former Soviet Union, and Japan. In 2006, you see the photo here below. You have also China joining the project, South Korea, and India. Now, in numbers, how expensive is ITER? So, first of all, if you look, this is the International Space Station. So here we are talking in billions of euros, on around 100 billion euros. Then the famous Apollo project, the first man on the moon. This is a project, we wanted in fact that ITER could be as Apollo project because it was like a blanco check in the time. They wrote a blanco check to make sure that the Americans would get the first man on the moon. Unfortunately for ITER, we have a lower budget. We are more around 10 billions of euros, a little bit higher. Then the other project is Airbus with the A380. Then you have Galileo project. And then you have in CERN, in Geneva, the Large Hadron Collider. So this is also one of the big projects that we all know. Now, just to compare ITER is around the weight of his reactor is 3 times the weight of the Eiffel Tower. So 3 times this weight is the weight of our reactor. Then we have around 10 million of components. An Airbus 380 has 1 million components. So we are 10 times more components than the Airbus 380. And also it's an international project between so many continents. So ITER is in fact a giant puzzle where all pieces around the world have to arrive in south of France, where we will see afterwards the ITER reactor, the fusion reactor is assembled. Then everybody knows the Empire State's Building, 400,000 tons of steel. This is our reactor building, concrete and steel. This is the same weight that the reactor building of ITER has. Now, fusion for energy, already mentioned by our consul. Fusion for Energy is the European agency that is based in Barcelona. It's close to Diagonal Mar. You recognize maybe the towers. It was set up in 2007 for a 35 years existence. Our headquarters is in Barcelona. We have, of course, offices in Cadarache in France, where the ITER project is built. Then we have also offices for the next step. In Garching, Germany, it's for the commercialized fusion reactor. And then in Rokasho, Japan, we also have offices because there was an important collaboration between Europe and Japan, and this took place in Rokasho and in Naka, places close to Tokyo. Now, why was there this big collaboration between Europe and Japan? When the ITER site had to be decided where will we build ITER, there was a big competition. And the competition was between Barcelona, Aix-en-Provence, Marseille, and Japan, Rokasho, and Canada. Canada, around close to Toronto, they had also a site for the ITER project. Now, the winner for the project was Cadarache, close to Aix-en-Provence. And so in return, the European offices are here in Barcelona. So we have around 435 employees, from which more than 300 are based in Barcelona. And in counterpart, Japan got other projects that we will discover later, like a linear accelerator, etc. So this is just to give you a bit the political background. So in total, we are 435 people. The budget is around 6.6 billion between 2007 and 2020. And between 2021 and 27, we have 5.6 billion euros. Plus, there is 25% that France finance as host state because they are hosting the project. Now, where are we now? like I mentioned before, we have a project in Japan. And this year, we had the first fusion reaction there in GT60 in Japan. So we had our European Commissioner and the Prime Minister of Japan that pushed the starting button to have the first fusion reactor in GT60, which is a reactor close to Tokyo. And one of the big differences is for the moment the biggest in the world, this reactor that exists. And it works on supraconductivity coils. But it's not as big as ITER. ITER is still a step further than this reactor. The previous reactor that was the biggest in the world was in UK, close to Oxford, was the JET facility, but was also a same type of tokamak reactor. And therefore, the moment they have also the most, let's say, records in the fusion research in the world. Then, on medium term, we have a big project that will be, in the south of Spain, in Granada. It's called DONES. It's mainly by CIEMAT, so it's the Spanish Research Center for Nuclear Energy that will build in the south of Spain, in Granada, an accelerator. And this is mainly for material research. So they will accelerate neutrons, bombard materials, and do research of materials for the future, for the commercialized fusion reactors. Then you have ITER in the south of France, and DEMO, that's in the long term, that's the commercialized reactor. That's one of the reasons that my son was also invited, because this is the future of fusion, is these DEMO reactors, is for our next generation of engineers that will work on this part of reactors. Now, this is ITER, where you see a little Homo sapiens, just to give you the impression from how big this fusion reactor is. And so, like I explained before, you have a donut-shaped reactor with 10 to the minus 8 millibar of vacuum. And inside this reactor, you have the fusion reaction. So you have the fusion that is taking place, and it's surrounded by a helicoidal magnetic field that is produced by poloidal and toroidal magnetic coils. And this magnetic field of 5.3 Tesla, which is also one of the most biggest magnetic fields that we have on Earth, next to the one in the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, produce a current inside the plasma. So the magnetic field that is confining via helicoidal way the plasma is making a current inside the plasma, and this heats up the plasma, but this doesn't give the temperature to get to 10 million degrees. So for this, we have all kinds of other systems, like electron cyclotron systems. Okay, it seems complicated, but it's like in the kitchen, your microwave. Okay, I hope there are no Italians in the room, but if you put your pizza in the microwave and you start to heat it up, at that moment, you use the same system. It's like this electron cyclotron heating system that sends wave to the plasma to get your 10 million degrees. Then the same is with the ion cyclotron system. Only there you work on radio frequency. So instead of microwaves, you send radio waves to the plasma. And then we have also neutral beam injectors. Neutral beam injectors sends neutral particles to the plasma. It goes through the plasma and it gives its kinetic energy to the plasma. So it's like if you're on the highway with your car high speed and you bump against a concrete wall, you also give all your kinetic energy to this wall. It's the same that we have with the neutral beam systems. They send a not charged particle through the magnetic field in the plasma, and it gives this heat to the plasma. And then we have here also cryogenic pumps that are completely cooled by cryogenics to get this vacuum of 10 to the minus 8 millibar, and also the magnets are cryogenically cooled. So we have an entire cryogenic system around our reactor, in fact. So here, just again, we heat up the plasma by the ohmic current of the magnetic fields. We send waves, microwaves, like in the kitchen, then but at much higher power. And then we also, via radio frequency, like this system that you see here from JET, we send also waves to the plasma. Then we inject neutral particles. And this is just an example of a magnet of jet to see, here is a little person to show you how big those systems are. Now, the European Union contribution to ITER, we have in total 7 domestic agencies. Like I mentioned, Russia, India, United States, China, South Korea, Japan, and EU. And they have to deliver all these pieces. We had more than 10 million of pieces that are parts of cryogenic systems, heating systems, diagnostics, magnets, buildings, the reactor vessel. So all these parts are distributed between all the domestic agencies, all the member states. And F4E, as European member state, of course, provides a big part of the cake, 60% of the project. So 60% is paid by the European Commission, in fact. So we have to manage, we have a nuclear operator, which is more like United Nations in Cadarache, that is responsible for the reactor itself. And he has to manage the interfaces, supervise the assembly, and operate the facility at the end. So what's important also that we create a lot of high-tech jobs. In total, we created 40,000 jobs between 2008 and 2017, and we are planning to create by 2030, 83,000 jobs just for this fusion reactor and for the future of the fusion industry. Then the industrial expertise, we have around over 550 companies working and 1,200 subcontractors. Just to give you an example, to build a reactor like the vacuum vessel, just to have the little material, the stainless steel of your vacuum vessel, it's the 7 level of subcontractors. So just for this one, for the reactor, we have 7 levels of subcontractors to get the materials, just for the materials of your reactor vessel. The economic growth is from 5 to 6%. We have more than 400 new technologies, and we created till now more than 20 spin-offs and startups and joint ventures thanks to the ITER project. The competitiveness, we have, of course, many companies and also small, medium enterprises participating to the project. Now, the budget, so in 2022, we are at around 8 billion of euros. We have in total 1,226 contracts, and we started in 2008. So this is the progress of money spent, a number of contracts signed with the industry for the ITER project. Now, F4E awarded more than 6 billion euros. We have 1,226 contracts, 612 contractors, 1,700 subcontractors, and we created direct and indirect jobs of around 30,000. Now here you see the project in 2011 in south of France, a big pit. They used dynamite to get this pit done in the south of France. So this is the level -2 of the reactor, of the fusion reactor. Here you see in 2013, the center of the pit where the reactor will come. And we have here 500 anti-seismic bearings in total under the reactor. Because Cadarache, south of France, is a seismic area. So you have a lot of seismic events there. They had in the past, in the paleoseismic spectrum, a seism of a magnitude of 7, approximately. So this is also the seismic spectra that we use to design the fusion facility. And we have 500 anti-seismic bearings here under. So it's like your bed is the metal construction under your bed to make sure that the vibrations are damped, in fact, inside your bed system. So it's exactly the same that we are imitating under the reactor building. Now the coils, the magnetic coils are so big that we cannot build them in a company. We have to build them on site. So on site, this building was one of the first buildings. Here you can park 2 Airbuses approximately, just to give you some information on the site. And here we made the coils, the magnetic coils. So here you see the reactor building. Here you see the offices of the staff working on the project. This metal construction is the assembly hall building. You have components coming from Japan, from Korea, from China, from United States, Europe. So they all arrive in this big metal construction, the assembly hall building, and there they are assembled together and put inside the reactor pit. Here you see 2016, the construction starts to go faster. 2017, 2018, you start to see the reactor building, the two first levels. So remember, with dynamite, they had to make a pit. So here are the two first levels outside the pit of the construction of the reactor building. It's also full of, you see here, a lot of metal structures, rebars. Why is this? In case of, let's say, a terrorist attack, that you have an airplane crash on the reactor building, it can resist this type of events, let's say. So it's made for all type of load type of events on the reactor building that it can resist. Also, if you have a big incident of some water pipes breaking inside the building, with the concrete is strong enough to avoid any incident going to the outside world, in fact. Here you see again the construction in August 2017, 2018, where the buildings start more and more to grow. And here 2019, assembly hall building completely finished, and the reactor building, we are ready to close the reactor building in 2019. 2020, the reactor building is finalized. And here 2021, you see several buildings like the magnet buildings, the cryogenic buildings, the power supply buildings, the tritium building, the diagnostic buildings. The cryo plant is here with these big reservoirs for the helium. Here you see again the reactor building close up. And this is one of the latest photos, 2023, where you see the full site is getting finalized. Now, that is inside, some photos I made inside the reactor building. So this is the assembly hall building, where you see a piece of the reactor, and from the magnets that are put here, you see the reactor, and here you see one of the coils that will be put together inside the reactor building. This is the reactor building where all those pieces come together. Now, I don't see if you see a Homo sapiens somewhere here, but it's very small. So you have to imagine this as a huge structure. Also here, a Homo sapiens would be a very small person here downstairs. Now for Belgium, since 2007 to 2023, we had in total 28 million euros in contracts for the ITER project. And these are our main players for... we are not talking about the subcontractors. Sometimes it can be that a French company won the contract, but there are Belgian subcontractors also. But let's say the main winners are here, SCK Sun, which is the research center, is the same as CMAT in Spain, but for Belgium. Then Magix is to irradiate materials. Then one of the big players is NTT Data, is a provider of services for the project. Then the Belgian Military School, they built those antennas that I showed, these ion cyclotron resonant heating systems on radio frequency. And then you have also vacuum for vacuum technologies. Now, these are the main components. You have, first of all, the reactor building, the site and buildings that we saw. Then here you see my colleagues in one of the magnets, the superconducting magnets. Then here you see the vacuum vessel. This vacuum vessel is in total 9 sectors, and they are built in Korea, in South Korea, by Hyundai Heavy Industries, and in Italy by Ansaldo, are building parts of this reactor vessel, of this donut-shaped reactor. Then from France, from Framatome, you have wall protectors that are put between the reactor vessel and the plasma. Those panels can, via robotics, be removed and brought to a hot cell. So there are a lot of robotics because the radiation levels inside the reactor are so high that we use robotics to get those components out of the reactor. Once they are used, they are put in a remote truck, and then they are brought to a hot cell where manipulations can be done. Here you see some robotics that are used inside the reactors. Then you have the cryoplant and the fuel systems. This is the ion cyclotron, the one that is mainly designed by Belgium. Then you have some radio cyclotron heatings. These are some gyrotrons that you see. Then the neutral beam facility. We have a test facility in Italy, in Padua, where we already made a prototype on the same scale that we will be built in ITER. Then we have some measurement systems, some diagnostics, and we have plasma engineering and operations. And then here, this is the test blanket modules. This is a little bit the secret part of the project. There, every continent has his test blanket module: China, Europe, India, United States, South Korea. And the aim there is to generate tritium. So when those fast neutrons will react with lithium, you make tritium, and this is to rebreathe your tritium. And afterwards, here we also plan to make electricity production. So it's also to make the electricity for the project. Now, just to show you how complex the project is, some people can see this is a space shuttle. And here the front of the space shuttle is also one of the materials that needs the highest temperature, needs to resist to very high temperatures. The same we have with the diverter cassettes. So in the downcomer of your reactor, you will also have the highest temperature. And there also we use similar materials that are used in space shuttles for the diverter cassettes. So also here we use, let's say, the highest technologies for our materials that we are using inside the reactor. This is another example of high tech that we are using, our diamond windows. So those diamond windows is like a piece of glass, like the glasses that you are wearing, but they are made from diamonds and they are breathed. So there you have, for example, a cocoon, an egg that breathes a little diamond plate. And those diamonds are like diamonds. They say diamonds are forever. Those diamonds are forever. We did some tests in Germany in a laboratory, Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. We did a very high pressure on this diamond disc. And afterwards, with a microscope, we checked, and there were no cracks, no micro cracks inside the diamond disc. So everything was perfect. So this is important because we said hydrogen is the lightest element on Earth. It's a beta emitter, so you don't want to get it inside your body. So what is one of the main safety functions of a fusion reactor is to make sure that everything is confined. And these discs, they make sure that there is no hydrogen passing, but that the microwaves coming from your electron cyclotron system to heat the plasma to get your fusion reaction passes through these discs. So the high power microwaves passes, but the hydrogen and the isotopes of hydrogens don't pass by the disk. And this is my last slide. So here you see a little bit the advancements, that the points, the new points that we made in fusion energy. So first of all, one of the big milestones was JET. JET is the reactor that we have in the UK, in Oxford. Is the biggest fusion facility in the world. The next step was GT60 in Japan, where we use supraconductivity. Then the step after will be ITER. And the main goal of ITER, in fact, is to produce 10 times more energy than you inject in it. So for ITER, if you inject 50 megawatts, the aim of the research project is to show that we get 500 megawatts out of it, out of 50 megawatts. So that's the main goal of this research project, to propose 10 times more energy. And then afterwards, his demo is to commercialize the fusion reactors. Now, to show that fusion can happen, we had recently National Ignition Facility, but this is laser fusion. We had 1.5 times the energy out of it than we injected. So we had 50% gain of energy out of what we injected inside the little fusion capsule, because they work with little capsules with hydrogen in it, and we got 50% more energy. So this means fusion works. Also, like I mentioned in the sun, we have everyday fusion. So it's a long process. We use, like you see in ITER, a lot of new technologies, cryogenics. We use diamond windows. We use new type of materials. So every day we have progress, and we hope to get to this first commercialized reactor soon. So thanks a lot for your attention.
So, do you hear me? Yeah. So, thank you very much, Paul, for this talk. I'm pretty sure you have plenty of questions. We will make a short interaction with you. So there will be a microphone on which you will be able to ask questions. While people are starting to get their question, I maybe have one. I'm a bit biased because also working on ITER. And I have a question about based on your experience and also your personal opinion, what is technically the main challenges in ITER? What is the main technical challenge that will have to be proved with this experimental reactor?
I think the first challenge is ITER is an international project where you have all the continents working together. Already this point is a challenge to have the South Koreans with the Americans, with the Russians, with the Indians, with the Europeans, all the world working together. I think this is already one of the big challenges. The other challenges is, of course, it's a first of a kind. We never realized such a reactor because here we want to produce 10 times more energy than we inject in it. So it's a first of a prototype that we are making with a lot of new technologies and much bigger than ever made before. Like the magnetic fields, we are making 5.3 Tesla. It has never been done on the world, this type of magnetic fields. Except in CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, we have also very high magnetic fields. Yes, you know about it, you come from CERN.
Yes. Yeah, I think we have a very bright future ahead there. Thank you very much, Paul. Are there any questions in the audience? Yeah, the first row.
Por abrir un poco el turno, pero gracias, pues he entendido casi todo lo que ha explicado, por el mérito suyo, y dos preguntas. Una, ¿cuál ha sido hasta ahora la aportación por parte de la industria española al proyecto? Y segunda, ¿el conflicto de Ucrania puede interferir en este proyecto?
Okay, so there are actually two questions. Thank you for the talk. You understand almost everything. So the first question was, what has been the Spanish aportation that was made for this project? And the second one is, what has been the effect of the war in Ukraine on the project itself and how it has been going on?
Can you repeat the first one?
So what has been brought by the Spanish industry, the Spanish country to this project until now? What has been the main things?
So Spain has been working a lot on the construction of the reactor building by Ferrovia. It's a Spanish company. Then a lot of design activities were done by IDOM, which is a company based in Bilbao, I believe, and Madrid. Then Iberdrola has been also very active on the project. So there is a very big contribution of Spain to the project. Also now, one of the future projects for the, let's say, irradiation of materials in Granada, the DONES facility, will be a very big Spanish project with European and Japanese contribution in the south of Spain, in Granada. And here in Barcelona, we are more than 300 colleagues. We've also, of course, many Spanish colleagues that are based in Barcelona in our offices. So these are, let's say, the main contributions from HAR that I know for the project, yes.
And the second was for the impact of the war in Ukraine.
The impact of the war of Ukraine, of course, has a very big impact. Like you know that Europe is 60% is financed by European money. So if, for example, certain budget we cannot spend in the project, there is a high probability that it goes to budget for Ukraine, for help to Ukraine, because now, our commissioner does everything to help Ukraine inside this war. So now, like I explained in the beginning, also the project was a Russian invention. It was also the symbol of the end of the Cold War. This is also one of the main reasons that Russia is inside the project. It's very symbolic to have Russia in the project because it was the end of the Cold War. And that's why all the member states want to keep Russia inside the project, because it would be a very big impact if Russia would go out of the project. That would give a kind of symbol that we are all back in war situation.
Thank you. Other question? Maybe, also first row.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned. You mentioned about the. Do you hear me? Okay. You mentioned about the demo, which will be the first one, which will deliver really the electricity. When can we actually expect the first demo to be constructed? Because yes, we are all impatient. So when shall it work?
It's also a very good question. So demo is in fact the first step where everybody will start to compete. So China will compete against Europe, United States will compete. Once everybody starts with demo, the competition is opened to the market to get the first commercialized reactor. Because ITER, we all work together, but it's a research project. We are not producing electricity. The aim of ITER is to show that we have 10 times more energy so that the project works. But if you talk with my colleagues of South Korea, they say in 2030, we start to build the demo project. We start the construction with it. If you talk to China, they will say in 2035, demo will be ready. We will have our first commercialized fusion reactor. So it will be a competition, and we will see who will be the first one to make the first demo.
Thank you. I read a few months ago that the longest plasma reaction or fusion reaction was kept for 5 seconds. Can you explain us why it was only 5 seconds, and that you will be able to maintain it for hours and hours and days, or maybe even, let's say, a continuous reaction?
No, it's, for example, before I worked at the JET facility in Culham, it's close to Oxford, and there they use magnets that were cooled by water. So which means that they were able to do a pulse of 1 minute. They could make a fusion pulse during 1 minute. You didn't have the nuclear fusion during 1 minute. Maybe for 5 seconds you could have break even, that you have as much power coming out than in. But then you needed to cool with water 20 minutes, your magnets. This is one of the big differences with GT60 and with ITER, that we will use cryogenic systems to cool the magnets. So you are not obliged to wait for 20 minutes to cool those magnets. So that's a big difference. So you can go, it's called continuous working operation.
Sí, gracias. Trasladando el proyecto del 85, si no recuerdo mal, a la crisis del COVID y la alineación de países en un objetivo común, el proyecto ITER es un proyecto de inversión económica, es un proyecto de reto tecnológico. ¿Es posible acelerar la puesta en marcha? Porque es evidente que tenemos una crisis climática que necesita de ITER como una de las herramientas para combatir los efectos de los combustibles fósiles.
So, looking back from the starting of the project until now, it has been a lot of investment economically in terms of technology. And one of the questions is that we are facing the climate change. Is there a possibility to accelerate this what we were calling the demo reactor for the production of electricity? Is there a way that we could profit and benefit from all this innovation and accelerate this?
It's a very good question. I think the acceleration starts today. The acceleration starts, why? Because you get more and more. In total, you have 130 fusion facilities in the world. It's not something that some of them are under design, some of them already existing, but we are talking about 130 fusion facilities. It's not only donut-shaped. It can be like Wendelstein's 7X, that it's a stellarator, can be by laser energy, that you send laser energy. But what is now more and more a new trend is commercializing fusion reactors. And now there is a big competition ongoing of startups. So recently in Germany, we have Gas Fusion, one of the big startups. Then in France, we have also a startup, several startups in fusion industry. So I think also this commercial part, and United States is also more going already to inject money in companies to try to find these commercial plans. So I think this is also a new trend starting very recently. This will also help to accelerate, in my opinion, the possibility to have a commercialized fusion reactor, to have all these startups also working in parallel on their project, in fact.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting to have this experimental reactor in parallel with the industry working on to make this possible as soon as possible. I think we're all expecting it. Other questions in the audience? Yes, I think on the back.
Thank you. Hi, Paul. Thank you for the presentation. You talk about the question of Mr. Consul about the demo projects, and you said something that attracted my attention, that it's a common research, but then at one point the IP will be shared, I guess. And my first question is, how will it be shared? And then will be a competition for production. So Europe is the main contributor for the research. How do you see the production capacity and the position of Europe once the project is on the commercial phase? Are we going to be good in comparison with China and the US for independence of energy, climate, as the other person talked about? So we'll be in a better shape than we are now, thanks to that project.
So indeed, so the ITER project, at the end, we will make the core all together. So the core is the donut-shaped reactor with all the heating system, the diagnostics to get your fusion reaction taking place. Now, like I mentioned, there is a secret part in the project. Every continent, Europe, China, they have their test blanket modules. So it's a cassette that goes inside the reactor, and there you generate, in fact, for Europe, is it via lead lithium, you generate tritium. So by the fast neutrons that interact with the lithium, you generate tritium, and you can also generate electricity. So you make it, that's the part that you need to make it commercialized, in fact. So that part is different for all the continents. So every continent, his demo reactor will use that specific technology that they are developing in that, let's say, secret part of the project. So that makes already the difference in all the type of fusion reactors that you will have in China or in Korea or in Europe. And then like the fission reactors, you will have different companies that will start to commercialize them. In Europe, it's typically Framatome that makes EPR, European Pressurized Reactors, that you have in Hinkley Point C or in Flamanville, this type of reactors. Then for US, it's typically Westinghouse. Westinghouse is the big manufacturer of fission plants. So you will have, maybe it's not the same players, but you will have the same type of competition of big companies, one European, one American, that then afterwards will try to compete each other to have contracts with, most of the time, and DESA or other energy suppliers.
Thank you. Any other question? I think there was, no? Yeah, maybe again on the first row, yeah?
Perdón, lamento insistir. Si he entendido bien, el objetivo es producir 10 veces más energía de la que se inyecta. Y se ha conseguido, en algún caso, 1,5 por 1, o sea, 50% más. Entonces, la pregunta sería, ¿cuál es el umbral de rentabilidad? Intuyo que 1,5 no es rentable y que 1 por 10 es muy rentable. ¿El umbral dónde caería?
Okay. You understood, or?
Yes, it's about the efficiency of the plant.
Exactly, to make it efficient, yes.
How to make it efficient. So ITER is to produce, let's say, 500 megawatts, but it's thermic. So if you have a normal Carnot cycle, it means to get electrical power out of 500 megawatt thermic, it's only 30% of it. So it means if you want to produce 1,000 megawatt electric, you need to produce 3,000 megawatt thermic, 3 times as much thermic energy to produce electrical energy, the amount. And so typically nuclear power plant is around, EPR is 1,350, so you have 3 times more, so you need to be at 4,000 to 5,000 megawatt megawatt thermic to get 1,300 megawatt electric approximately, 3 times more. Now for ITER, if you produce 500 megawatt thermic, the electricity that you could get is around 150 megawatt electric. But the shape of the curve is exponential. So 50 megawatt can maybe give 500 megawatt, but 60 megawatt will already give much more megawatts thermic than with a normal plant, because you have an exponential curve depending of the energy that you inject. So how more energy you inject, the Q factor can be maybe more than 10. So you can get maybe 20, 30, 40. And then at a certain moment, you need to see what is the perfect Q factor, like you mentioned, to make it commercialized. So 10 is probably not yet the good number, but when we can achieve in 10, when we upscale everything, we will probably easily get 30, 50 or more, because it goes exponentially, the Q factor. And so the aim would be to have a reactor that produces around 3,000 megawatt thermic approximately, to have enough electricity production. So demo should be around those ranges, to have enough electricity for cities like Barcelona to have energy for them.
Yeah. Thank you. And it's very interesting because you have this parameter that, of course, demo is designed to make it rentable because it will be commercialized. And one of the important things is not just to make it bigger and bigger, but also stable and operable. So ITER is also a key in this sense because it will be operated and experimental, and we will learn a lot from the plasma physics to make it stable. Before we talked about a very short plasma. The idea is to make it longer, and by ITER we will manage to make it longer, so to get the key to go for the commercialization. So that's why also ITER goes in parallel with all this industrialization and get the final demo reactor. So we can already start designing demo, but we will learn from ITER, and it's very important in that sense. Yes, we have a question there.
I have a follow-up question regarding intellectual property. So you explained that there's the secret part, that each country does their own thing, and then there's the joint part where we all work together. I imagine there's some kind of agreement that the things we develop there then are in the public domain or open source or something like that. But what about the subcontractors? Are the subcontractors who solve problems, are they allowed to have intellectual property rights on the solutions that they make, or do they have to also hand it over to the public domain?
So it's a good question. It's all the intellectual property that is developed, like you mentioned, is in fact distributed around with all the participants, so all the continents. So if something in Europe is developed for this project, it has to be shared with all the countries participating to the project. Now, of course, many companies are a little bit, it's not easy. It's inside our contract, but it's a lot of disputes, because if there is something high-tech that is developed, many companies say, no, but we developed it, we are not so keen on to share it. So, but legally we make sure that in the contracts that we can share all this intellectual property. At the end, it's paid by taxpayer money with European funds. So it has to be shared at the end with all the other industrial partners also. So we are creating platforms for this also in the future to share all this know-how, in fact.
So it's not in the public domain then, it's in a shared ownership with the other partners.
Yes, but many things are already now published, like in Elsevier, or we have a lot of publications during conferences and in scientific papers. But intellectual property is one of the points, especially the fusion labs also in Europe. They don't like to share because it's sometimes a very big new invention, and it's difficult then to have put so much time but it's part of the game. They have to share it. Yes.
Thank you. There's also another question here on the back.
You mentioned that to get the reaction started in the fusion reactor, you need a lot of electricity to power all the magnets and heat everything up. So I'm just trying to understand how does it work when, like, to switch on a reactor, you always need another power plant to get it started, and once it's running, it can power itself, I assume. But how do you solve that? You always kind of like need another power source to get it started. How does that work?
Yes, exactly. So on one of the photos of the presentation, you see a lot of electrical networks. So we are getting from the French grid the electricity that we need to get our first fusion reaction, in fact. So it's 50 megawatt electric that we need to get this first fusion reaction. But this is all get out of the grid, in fact. So we get it from the electrical grid. But if one day you go in island mode, let's say, then of course, if you are disconnected from the grid, but you want still to produce electricity, or you can use diesel generators, but there, 50 megawatt is already quite some power. Or you can have next to it a mixture of wind farms and solar power to give at least the first energy that you need for your first fusion reactor. But once you have one fusion reactor working, you produce it, you put the electricity on the grid, and you can start more and more fusion reactors to be powered with the energy of your first fusion reactor. But for the first fusion reactor, indeed, it's like your car. When you start up the car, you also need your battery to start up the engine of your car. Here is exactly the same. You need first some energy to get your reaction started.
Thank you.
Again, another question here on the front.
Thank you. More on the technical side, you have this plasma. Thus, the plasma has a weight, and if you can put it up to a few million degrees Celsius, if you want to put it off, how can you make sure that it will not damage your magnets and the whole installation? Because I guess you will not be able to go from a few million degrees Celsius to almost nothing in no time. So how do you manage to control the temperature of the whole thing and that it stays? I suppose that the magnetic field is to keep the plasma there, but once that you actually have stopped producing, what happens?
Yes, no. So the torus itself is under 10 to the minus 8 millibar. So you have a vacuum. So it's a bit like a thermos, so that you have a vacuum barrier. So, but at the same time, as soon as there is one little impurity going in your plasma, the reaction stops. So you don't have your plasma anymore. you had a lot of black body radiation, but that's why the reactor is cooled. So you have a water cooling system around the reactor that cools the reactor permanently. In case even that water cooling system fails by black body radiation, this go then to the cryostat, which is a cryogenic system that is also, so you're like in a huge fridge, and this heat goes also, so you have never a meltdown of your reactor. So that's a big difference with a fission reactor. The ITER reactor will never completely melt down because the safety systems are so in place that even by natural convection, you can get the heat away. It's even, for example, if at home you take out your freezer, it's not that it's immediately room temperature. In your freezer, it's still cold. So it's that coldness that we use to get the heat dissipated from black body radiation that was just a few seconds before still in the reactor, in fact.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see also. Yeah, you mentioned briefly the safety aspect and the safety advantages of the fusion energy, of having it stopped and much easier manageable, the severe accidents. Are there other questions in the audience? If not, yes. Yeah, two last questions.
Is there any special reason to have chosen the location of Cadarache in France? Is there any special reason?
Special reason for the location in Cadarache in France?
No, Cadarache is in fact a place from the equivalent of CMAT or SCK in Belgium, where you have CEA, Centre d'Énergie Atomique, so the French Research Center, and they have already a lot of facilities there in Cadarache in the south of France. So they have fission facilities there where they are doing research, and so they had a big territory there available. So I think this was the main reason that France wanted to have the ITER facility there. And they did a lot of changes to make sure that those big components could arrive there. They changed some parts of the motorways, of the highways. Sometimes we had bridges where the components couldn't pass. So we had to build around that bridge a new way to make sure that the components could go next to the bridge. You can imagine it was very difficult. And it's also a seismic area. That's why we also built 500 anti-seismic bearings under the reactor building.
Yeah, that's why I asked, actually, for the risks. You explained about the zone, the seismic risks.
Yes, so, but it's foreseen. It's like every nuclear power plant. You have to foresee all the type of load conditions that you can have in the area. So we went to the paleoseismic spectrum to have this magnitude of 7. So we went really thousands of years ago backwards to see what was the worst seismic event that we had there.
So I think there were one question first here, and then after here, yes.
Thank you for this very interesting meeting. I would like to ask, is it possible to visit the installation of ITER?
Yes, we have once a year open day. I think it's just passed, was in April,
exactly,
like a few weeks ago. But next year for sure. And then we do also special visits in case there is a specific demand of an organization to come with quite some people to the site.
Yes, and it's very recommendable, actually. Yes, impressive. Now, yes, the question.
Thank you. If I understood well, the ITER will inject 50 megawatt and produce as a source of 500 megawatt of heat. What will ITER do with the heat? Will they have steam turbines and stuff like that, or they will dump it?
We will dump it. We will have cooling towers to dump the heat. It's a bit a pity because in principle, we could generate some electricity out of it. But the aim of the experiment is to show that we have 10 times more energy So in this case, we put some cooling towers to dump it in the air, in fact, the heat by steam.
Yeah, and also to have the production of electricity, it's also the purpose of ITER. We would have needed longer pulse and other things that will be developed at ITER. So that's what this secondary part of the thermohydraulic and production of electricity will come in the next step as demo, yes. Yes, new question.
You mentioned that ITER is almost ready. When will the first test happen?
It's a good question. So we have recently a new director general at ITER, Pietro Barabaschi from Italian, and he wants to make a new baseline because one of the important points is cost reduction, of course, of such huge projects. And he wants also to optimize, in fact, the fusion itself to accelerate afterwards the production of ITER. So he's now making all these plans with our teams that are then presented to the ITER Council in December. And in December, we will know the exact date of the first plasma and after of the different scenarios that we will have afterwards. But this will be communicated around December this year. So because they are putting a new baseline, it's called, in place at ITER.
So in December this year, you would know that it would happen somewhere next year, or are we still looking way to the future? Sorry.
No, we at that moment, depending on this new baseline, because we do a lot of also modifications to the plant to make it more economic, etc., to the facility. So we will only be able then to communicate an exact date. I don't want to communicate you now a date.
I totally understand.
We have to wait till the December the ITER Council. Then it will be in all the medias. You can see it then.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question. Thank you for your clarity. Right now, the first plasma, when is it foreseen for before the ITER? Because there is a date for the first plasma as foreseen right now.
Also, the first plasma will now be rediscussed in December during the ITER Council because the baseline completely changed. For example, inside the reactor, I showed you that space shuttle because with the materials that we are using for blankets. So these materials we will use in the diverter, so it's the downcomer of the system. But for the other blankets, we use a lot of beryllium. And beryllium has an industrial risk. It's not, we are not talking about a nuclear risk, but an industrial risk. When beryllium gets dust and it goes in the lungs, it's toxic for the technicians and so on that have to handle it. So we decided to, for example, to remove all beryllium and to replace it by another material that is not toxic, which is also a big cost reduction, etc. I will not go in all the details, but there are like very big modifications done, the biggest ever in the project. And this has to be approved in December. And then based on those modifications, the first plasma and the different scenarios will be made public afterwards.
But if I may follow up, if I'm not mistaken, ITER was construed with a date for the first plasma.
Yes.
And so my question was, has this date changed? What was it fixed at? And I'm not asking you to preempt on the December ITER Council. I'm just asking to see what time horizon we're speaking about.
No, I mean, the original date we should have today fusion. But because it's such a complex project with so much innovation, there have been, of course, delays also. I mean, also during COVID, we generated delays, etc. So many external factors made that there is a delay, of course, but we try to recover it with this new baseline.
Thank you. I don't know if there are other questions. If not, we can thanks again the speaker.